Welcome back to Gun and Shot TV. It's been about a year with the channel, and I think there's 104 subscribers. So I figured why not do a gun that's 104 years old. So today I was going to talk a little bit about 1911s, specifically Mixmasters, such as this one. 1911s were designed by John Moses Browning for the U.S. Army pistol trials to replace the 38 long Colt revolvers. The Army wanted at least 45s caliber, and they opened it up. There were three big competitors. There was Savage that had upscaled their smaller, I think it was a 32 or 30, I think it was a 32 automatic pistol. There was also Luger, who had a rechambered from 9mm to 45 Luger, and there was Colt with their Browning designed 1911, as we know it now. I think at the time it was called a Colt automatic pistol, but pretty much it took some of the features that Browning had already designed and some of his earlier things like the Colt Pocket Hammer and the Colt Pocket Hammerless and other Colt designs, but it added a grip safety, a thumb safety, some of the features the Army specified. So the thing with collecting GI Colts is they're expensive. They're very expensive. So one thing you can do, especially if you're a new shooter, rather than go out and get your cheap Filipino or Chinese or wherever they're importing some of these things from now, you can look for what's called a Mixmaster. And what a Mixmaster is it's a gun that's been messed with and is a mix of parts. A lot of times in the Army, they would re-arsenal guns. And after so many years of use and abuse, if a gun was having problems with this or that, they'd send it in, the gun would get taken apart, and the worn parts replaced, and a lot of times the slides and the frames would get separated, or even, let's say, a slide got damaged somehow, a sight got busted off, something like that. If it wasn't something that was easily fixable, they could just trash it and get another one. The neat thing about the design is it's easy to swap parts. So what this gun actually is it's a M1911, so the first 1911 design without the scallops on the frame for your trigger finger, with the wide hammer, with the smooth mainspring housing here. And then I found this was dated to, I think, 1919, so just after World War I. And then this is actually a 1950s re-arsenaled slide. So when my dad got this in a pawn shop in Cicero in the 60s, I think he paid about $60 for it. Today it's probably worth somewhere from $800 to maybe $1,500, depending if you talk to somebody who's got a decent amount of money, but still substantially cheaper than an all-matching. But this is as would have been issued by the U.S. military after a re-arsenal process. The only thing I changed out was one of the grip screw bushings was stripped, and then the grips were 50s GI wooden grips, and they were moldy, and they were causing the frame to rust. So those had to go. But it's definitely an interesting way to get a cheaper, somewhat worn. A lot of times you'll see that there will actually be an A stamp, and that stands for arsenal or re-arsenal process. The one thing you do hear a lot with 1911s that I did want to address is there's a couple different rumors about 1911s, or maybe not rumors, but a couple different pieces of information I consider not necessarily true. When you're looking at a 1911, a government one, there's two big things you always hear: that they don't feed well, that they're picky on ammo. Well, they feed well if you use the proper ammo. Browning designed these guns to feed ball ammo, which is what the Army uses. So it's a round bullet. The system is called controlled feed. The bullet and the casing are being held by the magazine, the slide, and the feed ramp, and so at certain points the front of the bullet gets jammed into that feed ramp to make sure that it's securely held. What that allows you to do is you can have a gun that will cycle and feed at any angle, because that round is always being controlled. So while it does cause pickiness in modern hollow points, it's not really necessarily a bad thing. It's how the gun was designed. You can get a modern 1911 clone that's got some work done to feed modern hollow points, but if you want to go with something modern that feeds modern ammo, I'd recommend going with something other than 1911. These are great guns, they work well, but I don't know that the design really is that tolerant to getting messed with, because you're making a bunch of compromises, and at a certain point you can just go get a polymer gun that holds more and is way easier to carry. The other thing you always hear with 1911s, especially USGI ones, is you can't hit the broadside of a barn with them. Well, they were never made to be necessarily target pistols. You can tighten up the bushing and get the barrel locked in pretty good. But if you shake a GI 1911, you'll hear that rattle. That's the frame and the slide kind of just working around. There's a lot of looseness and a lot of tolerance there, so the gun will be reliable. Another issue that I think a lot of people don't realize with the 1911 is these guns started to come out in 1911. The U.S. military continued to use these 1911 guns all the way up until Vietnam. And I think in the late 70s, early 80s, they were replaced by the Beretta M9. Some of these guns, like this one, were made in the teens, and they were used for, 60, 70 years. At a certain point, you're going to have worn barrels. You're going to have worn bushings. And I can't guarantee that all these guns were re-arsenaled and taken care of the way they should have been. So I think by Vietnam, you went from veterans in World War II who swore by the 1911 design to Vietnam where, that they were junk, you couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with them. So I think that's something that needs to be considered. And, if you have accuracy issues, check the barrel, check the rifling, stuff like that. So all in all, like I said, if you're interested in a USGI 1911, a Mixmaster might be the way to go. In this case, like I said, I don't think you're going to find one for $60, but this is a Colt frame and a Colt slide, and it works great. It shoots flawlessly. So, it's something to have a little bit of knowledge and maybe do a little bit of research, look on GunBroker, and be aware of condition. Like, there's a lot of times people will fake a government frame when it's actually just a regular civilian frame, and they'll stamp stuff to make it look like it's real. So if you have questions, look around online, get some more info, but don't necessarily fear a Mixmaster. They can be a great value in 1911s. So for Gun and Shot TV, this is Chris saying, have a rootin' tootin' drunken shootin' day. Thanks for watching.